Welcome into another episode of Locked On Phillies. And in today's episode, the struggles continue. The Phils have their first 3-game losing streak of the season, and they got shut out in 10 innings. If you stayed up for that one, you did not get your money's worth. We'll break it down. We'll talk about the issues. Also, where's the level of concern at? We'll talk about how they could potentially bounce back in game 3, but also like how worried should we be about this team right now? And finally, it's a big day in baseball. If you're not sure why, well, stay tuned. I'll tell you why this is a huge moment in the history of this sport, what happened today. All of that on today's episode.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I'm Connor Thomas, your host. Thank you so much for checking us out. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And please always remember, make sure, if you haven't yet, rate, review, subscribe to the YouTube, all that stuff that shows you like Locked On Phillies. It really helps us out. If you do like us, I appreciate it. If you don't like us, well, hey, hopefully I'll start to do a better job and win you over. That's what I try and do every single time. And maybe you're just here because you want to hate on the Phillies because they're finally kind of falling apart a little bit. I don't know if I'd use that terminology. We'll get into that. More importantly, eBay Motors is our sponsor today for the episode. From brakes to exhaust kits and beyond, eBay Motors has over 122 million parts to keep your ride or die alive. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to bring home that big win. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed fit. Only available to U.S. customers. The Phillies are, man, I had a tweet last night. This is, I think, the perfect place to start this episode. I forgot what it was like to hate baseball. They really haven't had that many games where it's just like, oh my God, that was a mind-numbingly annoying game. And I don't know that last night was truly that because Zach Wheeler was awesome. He went 6 innings, 2 hits allowed, shutout performance. The Philadelphia Phillies pitchers did not allow an earned run in the game. You might say, Connor, they lost 1-0. Well, yeah, that ghost runner in the 10th inning doesn't count as an earned run. So technically, the ERA for the Phillies pitchers, well, not technically, I mean, literally, the ERA for the Phillies pitchers in last night's game was a 0. And yet they still lost. And also the offense, I mean, you had 7 hits. It's not like you got 2 hit or something and you just didn't have chances. They just didn't cash in on the chances. 7 hits and no runs that's dirty work, folks. You've got to find a way to get some of those runs across and cash in on opportunities. I will tell you this, right? It's annoying to watch Spencer Howard throw 4 scoreless innings against his team, especially knowing what he was when he was here and what he was not when he was here, which was that caliber of pitcher. But kind of can be tricky tough when you're doing what the Phillies had to do yesterday, which is facing a bullpen game. You see one guy inning 1, another guy inning 2, and then a couple innings from another guy, and then back end of the bullpen. Before you know it, you haven't had a chance to really settle in against anybody. The issue with that strategy is it's not sustainable because you can't be throwing every guy every day. Like that just does not work at the major league level, and you don't carry enough players to do it consistently. So that's why you can't always do the bullpen game. But I'll tell you what, there are some times where I think, man, would you be better off just always doing this? Or is this an advantage to have days like that? I do think at points it makes it tougher to figure out a pitcher. It's not an excuse for the Phillies to get shut out through 10 innings, right? I'm not trying to say, oh, well, that's why they got shut. No, they should have scored runs. They should be able to hit a team like the Giants. The Giants are red hot right now. Tip of the cap, credit to them. They've won, like 10 of their last 12. They're playing really good baseball right now. And their pitching staff has been pretty solid in this series. And the Phillies offense has been struggling. So it's just, I don't know, a whole bunch of different contributing factors that went into the loss yesterday. I didn't think the defense was particularly bad. I didn't think the pitching was bad at all. I thought Wheeler was awesome. And I don't know that the approaches at the plate, there's only one plate, there's multiple approaches, were too bad from the Phillies' perspective either. I mean, I'm just looking at the amount of strikeouts that the Philadelphia Phillies had in the game. They struck out 9 times, which is not great, but those 9 strikeouts came from 1, 2, 3, 4, only 5 players struck out for the Philadelphia Phillies. So I don't think it was even like a bad approach at the plate. Just they're in one of those stretches, right? It happens. Now, here's what's annoying, too. Why is it always San Francisco? They've lost 9 straight in that stadium. This team, the Giants, came to Philadelphia for a 4-game series at the start of May, and they lost all 4. They got swept out of Citizens Bank Park. And now the Philadelphia Phillies are in danger of getting swept out of Oracle Park out there. And I'm just like, is this just a place that the Phillies are unable to play? Is there some weird magic out there? Is there something strange about the stadium? I've seen some theories on social media that because it's a larger stadium and the Phillies are a home run heavy team, that it makes it tougher for them to play their type of game out there. I understand part of that. I will also say that the Philadelphia Phillies, to me, have not seemed to be hugely home run dependent this year the way they might have been the past 2 seasons. So, again, also not an excuse. Here's what I chalk it up to. This is exactly my thought process when it comes to stretches like this with teams of this talent level. It happens. That's kind of all you can say. It happens. I know it's not a great answer, right? I know it doesn't make you feel any better. And I know you're not going to sit down tonight to watch the game and just be like, it happens. Like, no, you want to see the team win. I want to see the team win. But there are times in the season, like the Dodgers have a 5-game losing streak at one point this season. The Braves, they're in all kinds of trouble because of injuries that are facing them. And they've had rough stretches where they haven't played teams that they should be beating well. The only difference with the Phillies is they went so long without it that you almost expected this team to never do it. And this is a dose of reality. This isn't a dose of, oh no, this is back to level. And they're not back to level. I don't know if you know this, so let me just update you on this for anyone who's like freaking out about yesterday's game and where the Philadelphia Phillies are at and losing. The Phillies are 38-18. They're still 20 games over 500, and people are treating it like they're 2 games over 500. They still have the best record in baseball, best winning percentage in baseball. As far as the run differential, oh no, they're now the second best team in baseball in run differential. They're only 3 runs shy of the New York Yankees, who have been red hot in that category. Like, yeah, it sucks. And there are some guys that need to step up, and we're going to talk about it coming up when we talk about the level of concern and what the potential things that could pull you out of this stretch are. I don't really have a major issue with the defense overall. I don't really have a major issue with the offensive approach overall, the base running overall. I know some of those things haven't been great this year or lately, but none of those are like killer issues. The offensive approach would be, and I don't think it's been that bad. I think they're just kind of in a cold stretch right now. Now, here's the thing, right? Does this cold stretch, this is what's really important. I want you to think about this. Does this cold stretch make the Philadelphia Phillies a bad baseball team? Are they not still the best team in baseball right now? Like, to me, they're still the best team in baseball. They still have the best record in baseball. They're 20 games over 500. They're still leading their division. The talent is still there. They didn't like lose players to injury for the season. Like, no, this team to me is just as good as they were before they had trouble like this. So let's think back a year to everyone who reacted the way that we all kind of did to the NLCS loss to the Arizona Diamondbacks. And this is why the Phillies ultimately ran it back. And this is something you need to keep in the back of your mind about this team. This is the same kind of stretch the Philadelphia Phillies went on. The only difference with that last one was it was in one of the biggest moments. You know what happens? Baseball humbles you. And it doesn't care if it's October or May. There will be times where teams slump. And that's how great teams get knocked out of the postseason. Sometimes you lose to lesser teams. And this stretch is very similar to that stretch. You're still getting solid pitching. The offense just hasn't come through. And you know what we found out by the Phillies running it back? Hey, turns out they were probably good enough to win the World Series last year and were a really good baseball team and still are a really good baseball team and have a great core of players. It was a bad time to slump. And this is not a bad time to slump, but my point in all of this, and there's a bigger point there of just like, oh, well, we talked yesterday's episode about going all in and a bunch of trade deadline. Like, do you dish out a bunch of prospects? You could do what you want to try and make this team greater, but they're already great. And I think they're already at a level where they should be expected to be in the conversation for World Series and make a run in the postseason. And you could go trade prospects for anybody. It's not a guarantee that what just happened over the past couple games isn't going to happen again. It's just kind of luck of the draw. I know there's more to it than luck, but some of this sport is just being hot at the right time. Right now, the Phillies aren't hot. But again, they have such a big cushion built, and they're not going to be bad forever, just like they weren't going to be unstoppably good forever. How do they bounce back? Well, that's a conversation we'll have coming up, as well as the level of concern you should have for the Phillies right now. I think you can kind of tell already by the way that I'm talking about this. It's not high for me, but there is a healthy level of questioning that we're going to discuss as well as we continue today's episode of Locked On Phillies. Let's talk about our title sponsor, eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. That's the formula for winning championships. And it's also what keeps your vehicle alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and not just maintain it, level it up, right? That's what we're talking about with the Phillies. Your car may be great. Maybe you want to level it up to even greater. That's what the Phillies are going to try and do at the deadline. That's what eBay Motors helps you do even easier than the MLB trade deadline. eBay Motors makes it so simple. And it doesn't matter what you want to get. Could be superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights. They got a bunch of stuff. Could be into speed, could be into power, could be into style. eBay Motors has you covered with all of it. They've got over 122 million parts for your vehicle, and you're always going to find exactly what you look for. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, too, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. All the parts you need, the prices you want. It's super easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Let's discuss the concern level and also game 3, because the series isn't over. The Phillies have not been swept yet, and I do think that they're still going to have a very good chance to win today's ball game, right? Let me see if they're favored in today's game. I would understand if they weren't, because the Giants have been playing so well. Yeah, the Phillies are still minus 135 favorites on the money line. They have a 55.5% chance to win the game, according to the ESPN matchup predictor. I would understand if they weren't favored in this one, because you're seeing another lefty who's been pretty good lately in Kyle Harrison. He's 4-1 with a 3.9 ERA and a 1.3 WHIP. Christopher Sanchez is on the mound for the Phillies, who has had his shaky parts of his season and his really good parts of his season. So that pitching matchup, Sanchez, by the way, 2-3, 3.15 ERA, 1.45 WHIP. So the ERA lower, the WHIP higher, the strikeout numbers similar. 6 more strikeouts for Kyle Harrison and 6 more innings. So I don't know. That just kind of adds up. Here's a big difference. Kyle Harrison's given up 7 home runs in 60 innings of work. Christopher Sanchez has only given up 1 home run so far. Big ballpark, so might be hard to add to Kyle Harrison's total on home runs there, but relatively even pitching matchup in this one. What I'm interested to see is the guys who got off days yesterday. I imagine Alec Boehm will be back in the lineup. He sat yesterday after a rough defensive game. It was a scheduled day off. It had nothing to do with the performance in game 1 of this series. Rob Thompson made that very clear to everybody, including Alec Boehm, with his comments about it. But I expect Boehm to be back in the lineup. We'll see if they're going to let Bryson Stott face a lefty, if Brandon Marsh is going to face a lefty today, and see if you can get guys out there against Kyle Harrison that are probably your better player. Edmundo Sosa has to keep playing. He has to be out there right now. Until Trey Turner comes back, Edmundo Sosa is good enough to be an everyday player. He's red hot, so he'll still be out there. I'm also going to say this, right? As we talk about guys that need to step it up in the final game of the series, and just in general right now, there have been so many people reaching out and saying, why are people not talking about Nick Castellanos? Why are people not saying more about Castellanos batting 199 right now, 6 home runs, which actually is not a bad number. It's lower for him, but it's tied for 4th on the ball club, so it's not like he hasn't hit home runs. But that 199 average is a major sticking point for a lot of people when it comes to Castellanos, and people can't understand why that's not the big story with the Phillies right now, because he was an all-star last year. Here's the thing, right? What exactly do you want me to say about Nick Castellanos that you don't already know? Is it just like you need to hear someone say it into a microphone on a podcast? Like, I will do that. And I'm not trying to say, like, I'm not trying to demean anyone who believes this. Nick Castellanos has to be better. But when we talk about Johan Rojas, there are options to change the center field position. When we talk about, I don't know, other guys that are struggling, if you talk about like Garrett Stubbs as a backup catcher, the Phillies can make a move at the deadline for a different backup catcher. They're not going to, but because it's not that important a position, especially with JT. My point is, when Taijuan Walker struggles, you have Spencer Turnbull in the bullpen, and I can say, hey, maybe it's time for Spencer Turnbull. Nick Castellanos is going to be your right fielder basically day in and day out. He'll get off days where Pache will go out there, or maybe they'll shift Rojas or Marsh around, or maybe Whit Merrifield will go out to right field. But Nick Castellanos is your starting right fielder, and that's not changing. With the amount you're paying him, with the upside he can give you, with the contract, the length that it is as well, like, you are going to be playing Nick Castellanos in right field kind of regardless of his performance. And that might sound crazy. He'd have to really drop off. He'd have to be in the double digits in batting average for you to start making change. Like, you're not going to go get someone at the deadline that's going to start in right field over Nick Castellanos. You're not going to send Nick Castellanos down. You can't. He has no options. That's never going to happen. There is no solution besides Castellanos needs to hit better. And the way he needs to hit better is literally what everybody sees. The approach at the plate needs to be more consistent. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. I'm not breaking any news there. And that's why there can't be a deeper conversation on Castellanos, because all that can really be said is he's got to have a better approach. How many ways can I say that about Nick Castellanos that'll make you feel any different about him? So for everyone who's been complaining about Nick Castellanos, I get it. I'm not defending the guy. I'm just saying there's not much anyone can do besides him putting together a better approach. And that's just the reality of the situation. So there's your Nick Castellanos mentions and everything. Hopefully that explains why it hasn't been talked about as much as some other issues facing this team. Now, just a heads up for today's game. If you're not aware, you need your scheduling worked out. 3:45 p.m., so a bit of an afternoon game. Here's why I don't love it. I like it for my sleep schedule. I like having afternoon baseball, and it's a getaway day before the Phillies come back home here. They have an off day tomorrow. That's all good. But they played at 9:45 last night. They played at 5:05 on Monday. They have been playing at a bunch of different times. And that, along with the travel, along with being in a different time zone, is just they probably do not feel very regimented right now. And what do we always talk about with 162 games in a baseball season? Guys like to be in a routine. It's hard to get in a routine when you're playing at a different time every day. It's hard to get into a routine when you're on a different time zone. It's hard to get into a routine when you're on the road. I'm not making excuses, but I just 3:45 p.m. after 9:45 p.m. after 5:05 p.m. is just you probably don't feel too comfortable right now. And maybe that's contributing to it. Maybe the Phillies just need to get back home, where they've been really good this year. They've been great on the road too, but they've been better at home. See if they can take care of business that way. But one more game to work on. And the level of concern, right? I promise you we would talk about this. It's not too deep of a conversation because I believe I've made generally my point already on this. But this team has very, very minimal problems. They do. Anyone who's freaking out about this stretch right now saying, this is the team we thought they were, this needs to change, that needs to change, their approach is bad again, their fielding is bad again, their base running is bad. Anyone who is approaching this situation that the Philadelphia Phillies are in with that type of response, how are you going to survive? How is your blood pressure going to hold up until October and through October? There are 104 games left to play for the Philadelphia Phillies, maybe 105. There's a long way to go. And we had a 50-game stretch where the Philadelphia Phillies had the best start in franchise history. So you're going to tell me a 5-game stretch, 1/10 of that sample size, is enough to completely undo everything? It's just not. It hasn't changed anything in the standings. I read you the standings. They're in the same spot. They have the best record in baseball. They're leading the NL East. They're leading the National League. They're better than every other team still in the win column. The concern level? None. I don't know. The annoyance level is up because I want to see this team win again. I'm very annoyed that they aren't taking care of business the way that I think they're capable of based on talent level. But I'm concerned about anything? Nah, man. Not at all right now. They'd have to go on a 5 or 6 game losing streak before I'm ooh, okay, what's going on with this team? They just hit 3 games. There's a good chance they win today. My concern level is negative. Okay, maybe not negative, but it's basically 0. So take that for what it's worth. Maybe that helps you if you're mentally kind of in a spot where you're worrying about this team. Just one man's opinion, but I do believe I have a good handle on this team in this situation right now. Coming up next, we're going to talk about, this is really important. This might be the most important thing I talk about on this podcast today. It's a big day in baseball. If you're not sure why, I'll tell you what changed and why you should care about it as we wrap up today's episode. Let's talk about FanDuel first, though, because it's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers, you're going to get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Now, right now, unfortunately, for the Phillies, it might be a good bet to take like their team under. They haven't scored much at all. Or maybe you think that they're on their way to a breakout game. Today, maybe they'll finally start to hit out there in San Francisco. Maybe just like them on the money line. You don't have to do too much. Just bet something you feel very comfortable with. Throw 5 on it, and you can get $150 in bonus bets if that bet wins. It's that easy. Then you could spend that $150 in bonus bets on a bunch of other bets. Make yourself some money. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count or every swing in baseball count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So, we had a major shift in the way that baseball is remembering their history. As of, it was either yesterday or today, but it just became official. The Negro League statistics that were previously seen as a league that was apart from Major League Baseball have now been melded together with the overall baseball record. So there's now a new all-time batting champion for Major League Baseball. It's Josh Gibson. He actually ended up being up near the top of like a lot of statistics because of his numbers from his time in the Negro Leagues. Here is what I will say. The first point, if you have any major issue with who holds a record between a bunch of guys who aren't around anymore, like I think you are just absolutely getting worked up over something that is not like worth getting worked up. Like, who does this hurt? Right? Like, I don't know, man. Most of the guys who are at the top of these record books have been gone for a long, long time. So I don't think it hurts anything. Like, there's really very little way to say that this isn't the right way to handle it. But I will respond to one point of criticism, which I think is a fair thought process and something that can be explained away. So I saw people saying, well, is it fair to compare Negro League statistics when you're playing against different players in a different league to Major League Baseball statistics? Like, why are they equal? And I got to be honest, it was not equal. Now, I wasn't around to watch with my own eyes, but the level of Major League Baseball and the level of Negro Leagues baseball, sometimes it was elevated for one and lower for the other, and sometimes vice versa. I'm not here to debate which one's better, but they weren't playing the same players. So, yeah, I understand the argument of like, why should these stats count for Major League Baseball? Here's the counter argument. The guys in the Negro Leagues were not allowed to play. It wasn't like they chose to go to a different league. It's not like what's happening now with live golfers choosing to play on that tour and PGA Tour golfers. But no, that was not a choice. That was imposed upon players who were not allowed to play in Major League Baseball because of the color of their skin. And anyone who tries to defend that reasoning is flat out just, we're not even going to go into that. That's absurd. And that's ancient thinking. And that's not the way anybody should feel about anyone because of the color of their skin. So the point is, they didn't have the opportunity. And while you can't go back and say, okay, well, we're going to reanimate Josh Gibson and put him in the major leagues and allow him to play, like hindsight, you can't do that. The best you can do is add their stats in. It's the only real option you have. So that is what Major League Baseball is doing. And I commend them for doing it. I think it's overdue. I think it's a really cool thing to see those players. We always kind of recognize those stats, but to see them recognized by Major League Baseball and added into the record books, it's something that I think we should all be looking at and saying those guys deserve credit for the baseball players that they were, and they're getting it. And I have no issue with that, and I don't think anybody else should as well. So I think it's a good day for baseball. And hopefully it's a good day for baseball out in San Francisco, and the Phillies can just win a darn ball game. So I don't have to do another show about a 4-game losing streak for the Phillies. You know what? I thought it was refreshing when they lost like 2 in a row because I've been talking about them winning for so long. I'm over it. You can go back to beating everybody now, Phillies. That's what I'm hoping. All right. Well, Whatever the case, thank you for joining us on Locked On Phillies today. I really do appreciate you taking the time. Please make sure you're rating, reviewing, subscribing to the YouTube. And also, remember, we're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So appreciate you giving us your patronage here on the Locked On Podcast Network. That's all for today's episode. So I will talk to you next time on the next episode of Locked On Phillies.